Hello, everyone, and welcome. As people continue trickling in, we are going to get started with today's webinar. And I am very excited for today's conversation. Just really glad you joined us. For those of you who have not seen me before, my name is Nathan Algrim, and I'm the Academic Community Manager at the Good Food Institute. Thank you. So again, for those of you who are new to our ecosystem, the Good Food Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to developing the roadmap for a sustainable, secure, and just protein supply. We are funded entirely by philanthropy, and our generous donors allow us to work towards this vision in 3 areas of focus. I am a part of our science and technology team, where we work to advance foundational, open access research in alternative proteins, and create a thriving research and training ecosystem around these game-changing fields. Our corporate engagement team partners with companies and investors across the globe to drive investment, accelerate innovation, and scale the supply chain. And our policy team advocates for fair policy and public research funding for alternative proteins. And I am coming from the US team, but I have the privilege of working with a global team of experts with our affiliates. And if we switch over to the next slide, we can actually see it across the globe. I am really excited for today because I might be the first person that gets to say this in a webinar format. We have affiliates in Brazil, Europe, Israel, India, the Asia Pacific region, and as of yesterday, Japan. So for those of you who didn't catch that announcement, please check that out. We have a dedicated website and a brand new affiliate in Japan, and all of us are extremely excited about that development. Moving on to the next slide, just to kind of give a framework for what this webinar series is. This is going to just be one of many iterations of the Alt Protein Pipelines webinar, and the goal of it is to share roadmaps for success in alternative protein training and education. As many of you know, being an emerging field, there's still a relative lack of opportunities for people who want to build their careers in the field. As with general trends in training and education, we know that empowering a robust workforce will require a multi-pronged approach. So in this series, we will highlight a broad array of real-world programs, and our goal is for this knowledge sharing to catalyze new program development and eventually kickstart the careers of future alternative protein luminaries. So with that, as I prepare to pass it over to our featured speakers, I really hope that this can be a learning experience for all of us. They collaboratively built and ran the hackathon we will be discussing today, and I will let them introduce themselves and their work. Then we'll follow their presentations with an open dialogue on the lessons they learned and advice for others interested in building such programs. So throughout, please add any questions to the Q&A box as they come up, and we will do our best to address them in our discussion. To help us tailor our discussion, I would love to know where you are all coming from. So as I pass it over to Arin and Lucas, you'll see a 1-question survey pop up on your screen. Please take a moment to answer. And remember, the other people on this call probably have similar goals to you. So I would really encourage you to, just share where you are from, maybe what your goals are. In the previous iteration of this webinar, we had some really great collaborations come out of it, and I would love to see what might be able to happen with all of our attendees today. So with that, Arin and Lucas, I will let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Nathan. Really great to have this opportunity to be speaking with all of you. We'll just do some intros first, and then I'll kind of talk a little bit more about the hackathon. But today we'll be talking about the Bite-Sized Innovations, Hacking the Future of Alternative Proteins, which is a virtual hackathon to cater to students in Europe and Singapore, which was run and organized by GFI-APAC, GFI-Europe, and TUM Venture Labs, specifically the Food, Agro, and Biotech team. Today we have me, Arin, representing from GFI-APAC, and Lucas from TUM Venture Labs. On my side, I am the SciTech engagement specialist at GFI-APAC. I work on talent and workforce development as well as curriculum building from our region. That's how I got involved in this project, and I'll pass it along to Lucas to let him introduce himself.
Hello, everybody, all around. Greetings from Munich, where the wonderful beer festival, the Oktoberfest, takes place at the moment. So the city is in a very different character at the moment. Actually, the Venture Lab is not directly located in Munich, but very close to a very famous place where you can study beer as well. So another connection, and it's called Freising. So the actual venture lab of ours, which we call FAB, Food Agrobiotech, is located in Freising. And I am the innovation director, and I'm dealing with all topics concerning business coaching, agri-food, ecosystem development. I'm leading very different operations. And most importantly, as we're talking about this topic today, I am leading all the very different educational formats we have, all the innovation formats to create actually knowledge for good that really has an impact.
Thank you very much, Lucas. And I think we got a brief intro of GFI. Before we get a little bit deeper into the nuances of the hackathon itself, let's learn a little bit more about TUM Venture Labs. And maybe Lucas, you can also introduce how we got connected, or like our core team, the four of us as well who worked on the project.
Wonderful. So how did we get connected, Aaron? Quite simple, because like a year ago, I started a new job, and my boss told me that there's going to be a great project coming up, which is going to be an alternative protein hackathon together with the Good Food Institute, mainly in this case in APAC. So I think this is how we got connected. So I never had a chance, but afterwards I never would like to miss this hackathon together with GFI, because that was quite wonderful. But talking a bit about the Venture Labs very shortly on the next slide. The Venture Lab actually is a venture between the Technical University of Munich and Unternehmertum. And Unternehmertum is the so-called entrepreneurship center of the Technical University of Munich. And the entrepreneurship center was ranked first place this year as a startup hub by the Financial Times. So we're very honored to work into this ecosystem. The venture labs overall are very different, because we have a lot of venture labs from quantum mobility to software AI and so on. But today we talk specifically about the best venture lab, of course, Food Agrobiotech. And overall, within this huge ecosystem we're operating, we do create a community that creates value for good. And we are involving very different stakeholders. So those stakeholders which you really need to integrate to actually execute and live innovation. From, of course, most importantly, startups and academia, but also foundations, the public sector, corporates, and venture capitalists. And if you have a look down below to the established organizations, there are two big sponsors of our venture lab as well. And those were really in favor on bringing in some challenges later on which the teams have had to work on. So just remember those ones. And on the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about the TUM Venture Lab Food Agrobiotech. It's kind of one of the leading incubators supporting agri-food and biotech startup teams. And our mission really is to enable entrepreneurship in deep tech and life science connected to our very special domain. And this happens from the mobilization to funded and scalable business. And we're driving entrepreneurial mindset all over by creating tailored, optimized support structure, and to which I'm going to talk about very soon. And something to mention very importantly, we are an early stage incubator. So we're helping the ideas of startups grow from launch to impact, starting with the overall idea and concept, and sometimes also no idea what they actually have to do to start up, but that's what we're here for. And how we're actually doing this? We're doing this by having the right outreach. So we're very present at students and researchers in the right domain. We do education of the target groups on the entrepreneurial mindset with very different domain-specific programs. One of that was the hackathon we're talking about today. We do have the overall venturing programs, and we provide lots of coaching to get the startups on track. And of course, we are driving a huge ecosystem with very different events, which we are executing throughout the whole year. Of course, always in our domain focus. And most importantly, we do provide infrastructure. So you get access to a technical hall, to labs, to makerspace, to digital infrastructure, which you really need to actually develop your tech. And on the next slide, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into our topic, and the slides might be a little bit overwhelming, but everything we do is connected to planetary health. And our activity, our entrepreneurial activity, is all around agri-food, and this is kind of our epicenter. And talking about the hackathon, I marked some of the hexagons that you can see how many different disciplines we really tried to cross-weave together to put them into a hackathon format and to help those topics get alive with very different teams, partners, and startups. And I think this is one of our most important strengths, that we can live and execute this kind of interdisciplinary approaches, bringing together huge expertise and ecosystem to overall get impact into the market. And there around, you also do some startups, but nevertheless, without diving too deep into, I think I can finish that and do a little mic drop and put the mic away and give it back to Aaron. And then we're going to talk about the hackathon format. So very looking forward to that.
Great. So yeah, thank you very much, Lucas, for that intro. And yeah, so like I said, we ran this Bite-Sized Innovation Hacking the Future of Alternative Proteins hackathon, and today we'll kind of be diving deep into that. So we'll start by having a short presentation from me and Lucas, where we'll talk about the overview of the hackathon, the timeline and logistics, the industry challenges, which were proposed to the students, the final product, some things we learned. So we'll do maybe a 10 to 15 minute presentation to go over this, and then we'll follow this by some guided discussion with Nathan, and then Q&A from all of you guys. And this time, where we're going through our slides, we kind of just want to give that kind of process flow of how we went about this, what our motivation behind the hackathon was, and what our desired outcome was. Right. Yeah. So I think we can go to the next slide. Thank you. And yeah, we'll start with the overview. Yeah, so essentially what this hackathon was is a 4-day virtual hackathon connecting students from Europe and Singapore. So between GFI-APAC, GFI-Europe, and TUM Venture Labs, what we wanted to do was to get students to actually get to work on these projects, which were kind of outside of the normal, just like maybe research lab projects at school or assignments they were doing as part of their coursework. We really wanted them to think of these big ideas and also address issues which were faced in the industry and promote this entrepreneurial spirit amongst the students. So we can build and inspire this next generation of innovators, people who will make those breakthroughs. And the way this collaboration came to be is that, you know, we at GFI APAC and GFI-Europe, we're kind of like, we have all of these connections and network within the all protein industry. And, you know, what we do is all proteins, and we're trying to think about how we can educate the students better. And then we got connected with TUM Venture Labs and Lucas, who I think really excel on kind of the startup and the pitch development, the innovation aspect of it. And we decided to put kind of these two skill sets together to create something which would be really exciting and fun for students. And we wanted to take this to the next level too, where we wanted to integrate skill sets from different regions and like students from different regions, right? So getting students from Singapore to be working with students with Europe. And also for them to understand maybe what are some of the strengths and weaknesses within the alt protein ecosystems, like globally as well, right? So I think to break down into kind of like three goals which we had. Well, the first one would be to foster an alternative protein innovation mindset in students, as seen here on the left. We designed the hackathon to promote high levels of innovation, innovative thinking amongst the next generation of science entrepreneurs, talents. And the way we did it was basically to provide that structure for the students. During the whole hackathon, the hack blocks, the brainstorming time, which we'll go into more detail in a little bit, we created using TUM Venture Labs, their expertise about how to develop a pitch, how to kind of think of an idea. So we kind of built this framework for them and guided them through the process of forming what their like business solution would be. Right. And then the second goal we had was to provide students with real world knowledge and skills. So we wanted to educate the students who are part of this program on all protein science, but not just that, also the business development process, as well as real world bottlenecks happening in the industry. And the way we wanted to do that was through having the industry challenges. So we engaged with industry partners from Beiwa, Bueller, Umami Bioworks, Happy Ocean Foods, Iridia, and Dr. Oetker to come up with the problem statements, which the students will be working on their pitches. And then not just having them provide the challenges, but also having the members from these different organizations, as well as from GFI and from TUM, to actually mentor the students through this process, right? So the entire hackathon, I know we have here a 4-day virtual hackathon, but the actual whole process was maybe closer to 2+ weeks, where the teams were formed. They had the time and space to like learn about the material, and then came the hack blocks at the end, where they actually kind of like had these sprints to develop the idea. But yeah, we really wanted to get them to think about real world problems here. And then on the third aspect, like I said, we wanted to connect students with different regional and skill backgrounds, right? So one aspect was getting students from Singapore to work with students from Europe, but also to blend the different skill sets as well. So we wanted to make sure that every group being formed had a good mix of people with technical, scientific backgrounds, as well as business development backgrounds. So what a team forming maybe a startup or a company would actually look like in real life. And we wanted to educate the students that, you know, you don't have to be able to do it all. It's really important to be able to work in teams and to leverage what people are strong at. Yeah. So this is kind of the bigger picture. Lucas, do you have anything to add here before we go into the logistics?
I mean, I can put one focus point on each of the headers here. So in the end, there were very different challenges. So if you talk about the process design has to be very process oriented and very objectives oriented. Otherwise, they're running away from the actual innovation process. And secondly, if you want to provide the students with the real world knowledge, you do need practical challenges, because if you want them to transfer the knowledge onto something which can really happen, this is most importantly, because otherwise, if it would have been a startup, it would just fail without even having started. And the last big challenge around bringing so many people together was we had to bridge Europe and Singapore. So that means we had time zone challenges. That means we had also cultural challenges. And the biggest challenge for us in the end to keep communication ongoing, to check in with everybody, to keep them within the process and also to feel good. But we will talk a little bit more about that later on. But I think those were also quite important challenges to mention along the way.
Yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, I think now we can go into the logistics aspect. So we'll just highlight a little bit about how we ran and designed the hackathon. So yeah, we really wanted to do this to make it the optimal student experience, considering that it is virtual, and how do we get students as connected as possible, right? So we'll first look at the flow of the entire program on the top here. So yeah, it was 2+ weeks. So we started on the 6th of June with a team intro. So all of the students who were accepted into the program were kind of gathered on this big Zoom call where we kind of gave the overview of the entire hackathon. We introduced the different challenges which was happening on this day. So the 12 different challenges we had for the students. We went through that. They were presented by the different industry partners. And then at this point too, we had the process of forming the groups, right? So at this point, the students were roughly 60 students, which were accepted into the program, were split into groups of like roughly 5. And we'll go into detail about how that happened a little bit more soon. But yeah, at this point, the different groups are formed. They know what challenges they'll be working on. And then they'll have this kind of period where they can work on their own for a little bit before the actual hack block starting on the latter part of June, right? So from the 6th to the 20th of June, they have this phase for preparation and learning. So this is where they will schedule their team calls, they will do their own research into their topic, they will start ideating a little bit based off of the framework that we gave them. And during this time, they can also schedule in sessions with their mentors, which were assigned to the different challenges as well, right? And then we get to the hack block from the 20th of June, essentially to the 25th of June, where we go into this really disciplined ideation process to form their final pitch, right? So during the preparation and learning and during the hack blocks itself, they're also getting presentations from different experts from the field to learn a little bit more about the technical aspects of all proteins, to learn about the the European ecosystem, the APAC ecosystem, and then to learn about how to develop a pitch, how to do business modeling. And then on that last day, we had each of the groups present, and they were all of the presentations were graded by a panel of judges based off of different criteria, which we'll go into a little bit more detail later as well. And there were 3 winners. And to really promote all of this virtual connection, we use things like Slack, Zoom, Myroboard, Google Drive, Google Slides. So we had everything organized beforehand. So all of the platforms were set for them to interact and work with each other. Yeah. And just to go into a little bit more detail, like I said, we have the preparation phase, and then we have the hack block phase, and then we have the final pitch day. So you'll be able to see in the preparation phase, a lot of it was about just kicking off the entire program, and then the team matchmaking, and then the first learning session where we introduce the European and APAC ecosystems to the students. Then they have this time to work on their own, and then during the hack block phase, they get presentation from different experts like TUM Singapore, Nurasa, Sprint D, startup insights from the protein distillery. And so you see that during this time, it's also an important space for the students to be able to network with people in the industry as well. They have workshops on ideation, business modeling, and other aspects of that framework for them to build a pitch, right? And then on the 3rd hack block, we actually get them to really train about how to build that final pitch deck and how to do a good presentation. So to prepare them for like the real world, if they were to try to get some like funding for projects which they want to work on in the future, or they want to take from this hackathon, right? And then the last day, we have the final pitch event. We have the evaluation and then the awards ceremony. Maybe I'll take a short break here to let Lucas add anything.
We can talk about some points in depth. For example, talking about the overall flow and process design of the hackathon. So in the end, imagine it's not 100% the same, but there is kind of a design thinking process behind. So in the end, there is a problem space and there is a solution space. And we have to prepare those participants to actually get underneath the problem surface. And it doesn't matter if it's a wicked problem and they have to find a solution, or like in this case, if it's challenge-based. If it's challenge-based, it's always connected to a problem, which can be external or internal. That very depends on the challenge provider. But be aware that there is a design thinking process behind, which clearly leads the different steps into figuring out how to create actually a business model out of this challenge. And another thing to add here, which is quite important, is that hackathons are very, very tough. And you can see the agenda is very, very tight. But we even made it tougher because we forced them, I call it forced, we forced them to do already pre-sessions before the overall hack blocks even started. That means we told them to do secondary research. We told them to develop ecosystem maps, that they do understand the topic, that they dive underneath the problem surface, and that they understand how the industry kind of works, and that they understand which stakeholders and different actors and entities are overall this topic. And going a step further, talking about the agenda. So just be aware about one thing. It's, of course, very important to design the process of the hackathon, but the agenda design is one of the very most important steps overall, because if you have the agenda set, all the other planning details will flow on their own. So just keep in mind, design the agenda first, try to integrate most of the people, and then go into the process design and match it, because the agenda will be the one factor which determines all. And lastly, what I wanted to mention is having inspirational talks throughout the overall process will help to provide insights for the participants who probably have no idea how industry or the practical world works, as we were talking to students, which are quite young as well. So do provide inspirational talks, because then they do get a picture on what it could look like outside their actual academia and ecosystem. So I think those were the 3 points I wanted to point out.
Thank you so much, Lucas. And I think we'll go into a little bit more of this during our guided discussion with Nathan. But this whole designing all of this, getting all of it together, all these logistics took us quite a couple of months to really get together, of like, yeah, a lot of hard work. So I think a lot went into making this very tight and clean agenda so that everything would flow smoothly from the essentially, the roughly 20 days, which we ran the entire program, right? Yeah. So now we can go into the actual acceptance criteria, how we formed the group, and the pitch grading, right? So acceptance criteria is how we actually decided which students could enter this program. So we had 120 candidates apply from Europe and Singapore. The split was relatively even, I want to say, and we had about 60 people accepted. So things that we took into consideration is whether they have strong technical or business background based off of what they're studying or different experiences they've had. They've had either previous project work or hackathon experience. So it doesn't necessarily have to be hackathon experience, as long as they've seen a project through to fruition. I think this aspect is really important, because it is quite an exhausting experience for the students as well to go through all of this. So we want to see people who are like really committed to seeing things through. Then on the skill set side, looking at like hard skills, but also soft skills, like ability to communicate with people, to work with teams, to deal with things virtually. So assessing those aspects. And then lastly, what is their motivation of joining this hackathon? Like, is it their passion for all proteins? Is it wanting to connect with different people? Is it wanting to learn about this space. So we wanted to make sure that that was clear for the students too, that they're coming in with a purpose for the hackathon. So we designed different questions in our application form according to these 4 main points. Then for the group formation, we wanted to make sure that one, they were regionally diverse. So we didn't want all European groups or all Singaporean groups. We wanted to make sure that there was a good mix. We wanted it to be diverse according to their skill set. So roughly at least 3 technical people to 2 business people on each team. And we also wanted to match people based off of the challenge preferences. So the 12 challenges were given to the students beforehand. And we wanted to make sure that each student was actually placed into a group which was addressing at least one of their top 3 challenge preferences. And then the final pitch grading was done between the GFI team and the TUM Venture Labs team. And we graded according to their technical solution that they're proposing, the business strategy that they were proposing, the sustainability considerations of the solution that they're working on, and lastly, how they actually did the pitch presentation, right? Were they confident? Were they clear? Did they involve enough people in the groups? How did that come across to all of us? So this was kind of the overview of how we did the assessment. And we had a lot of students to kind of manage over a short period of time. So yeah, we had to be really organized with that, with like our Excel sheets, tracking everything as well. Lucas, anything to add here?
I think we can deep dive a little bit more within the discussions afterwards, right?
Sounds good. Cool. Okay, then I think we can just quickly go over the different industry challenges. I just wanted to give an overview of the different topics that the students were covering, right? So we can go, yeah, firstly, from BayWa, we had 2 questions, one on the texture improvement of meat alternatives based on protein flours or concentrates. So what process, technological, or recipe steps can they be used to improve the firmness of the final product? Then the second one was on allergen-free alternatives to nut-based dairy applications. So different dairy, alternative dairy products, essentially in this case. Then next, from Bueller. This is more on the extrusion part of it and the ingredients going into an extruder. So how do we work on this problem on marble plant-based meat, which could potentially be a very high value product, and then also on variations in protein functionalities. So how do we address the different types of protein functionalities which are going into an extruder? Yeah, then a little bit from Dr. Oetker, we have clean label, non-dairy casein. So this clean label aspect is becoming really important in novel foods. And then secondly is creating sweetness. Again, clean label, and then basically how do we create sweetness from, not from honey, sugar, or fructose, right? From Iridia, which is a little bit more on the processing technologies and scale up side, we have heat integration in culture meat production. So how do we deal with the thermodynamics of scale? And then how do we facilitate the development of fermentation facilities by retrofitting existing equipment? So here we're going less from like we had formulation questions, we had maybe machinery questions. Now we're looking more at larger scale as well. So students really have to think about technological solutions as also the business case for the solutions that they're providing, right? From Happy Ocean Foods, a little bit more to the a mix. One is on the plant-based seafoods, which really speaks to the Southeast Asian consumer base, and then a little bit more about shared scale-up facilities as their second challenge. Cool. And then our last challenge provider from Umami Bioworks, more on the cultivated meat side, is how do we create the basically scaffolds or biopolymers for culturing fish stem cells? And then secondly, on the bioreactor modalities for designing scalable and efficient cell cultures. So these are pretty broad when you see it this way, but during the challenge presentations, the challenge providers went into a little bit more detail and were also available to mentor each of the groups through each of these challenges. I think we can quickly go over just the final product, and then we can maybe start our guided discussion shortly after. Yeah. Maybe just really quickly, I think we had really positive feedback and really impressive pitch presentations from all of the different groups. So I think the students did really well, like really, really well overall. It was really cool, and it was really great to see how excited they were in their Slack channels and how proud they were of like the final product that they produced too. Also, the Miro board and virtual framework. So their Slack groups, the Miro board, I think was a really big success. We had based off of TUM Venture Labs 12-step pitch formation. We had the Miro board set up for them to brainstorm idea together, and ended up being a really good platform for these virtual and like cross-regional sessions. Students left, I think, having really learned a lot. So there was a lot of information about finance, about scaling up, about market segmentation, choosing the right topics to work on, about the European and APAC landscape, and how to really develop a good pitch. And then we saw a lot of students like really proudly showcasing what they learned on LinkedIn afterwards, as well as the certificate of participation, which they got. So I think overall from our side, seeing how much they learned, how excited they were, and their impressive final presentations, we saw this as like, a really big win. I will let Lucas share a little bit, and I think after this, we can go into our guided discussion with Nathan.
So much to share. Where do I start? Remember, this is a learning journey, right? So there's also for the executing ones a lot to learn, because every hackathon has a very different character. But about the learnings we will talk afterwards. What I thought was very stunning concerning this hackathon. Normally, you shoot in some challenges, and let's say 60 to 70% make it till the end. In this case, we shot in 12 challenges, and 11 challenges made it to the overall pitch session. And I think just 2 people, but for very private reasons, left the hackathon. So the motivation was really, really high along the way. And we kept it high by always bombarding them really with information and with a lot of pressure that they have to produce the next content to reach the next milestone in the end. I think all those people were quite exhausted after the hackathon, but they also were really, really happy. And it always starts that those people who start, like the participants, the young students starting the hackathon, they do feel very, very lost. You provide them with the process, you provide them with very different information, and then you tell them you have to write a business model concept and you have to create a pitch deck. And they are just like, are you kidding me? Are you sure? Are we going to make it? And in the end, they do realize that nobody can walk for their own. So it's really, really about the team performing throughout the overall hackathon. And the better the team performs, the better the pitch concept and the overall business model will be in the end. And this is something you really have to keep in mind. Hackathons, doesn't matter if you create them or if part of a performing team, is always based on a very good functioning team. And in the end, what all those people proved us is that we designed it right, that we provided the right input, and that the learning journey really helped them understand an industry, a topic, more in depth, of course, a challenge, while also making contacts within this ecosystem being valuable in the future. So I think there's nothing more you can provide along this journey for young people who want to start a career.
Well, thank you both for providing that information. We had a brief preparatory call before this webinar, and even between then and with this presentation, I know I was learning a lot. And many of you probably heard the number of times that they were talking about. We'll get into this in more detail in the discussion. So in order to make this as fruitful and as illuminating of a discussion as possible. Everyone who is listening live, please put your questions in the Q&A box. I have my list of questions that's informed by the work that I do, but I would love to make sure that any general or specific questions you have can also be answered throughout the way. So I think one thing that I would love to start with, and this was, I think, addressed tangentially throughout, but just the fundamental question of like, why a hackathon? There are a lot of different structures and formats that would address the entrepreneurial spirit, as you were indicating. There are other formats that I'm familiar with in terms of like mentor matchmaking, internships, or other formats of accelerators. And I would love to know, especially from the TUM Venture Labs perspective, why specifically this format, when you have to prioritize your limited time, has that unique value add.
So in the end, we as Venture Lab Food Agrobiotech are all also behaving characteristically like a startup, because there's a huge workload. We have to fight the whole day, and we really have to prioritize and focus on different actions concerning the offer on education, what is of course one of our most important pillars. It's very hard to choose the right one, because you never know what you will get out of it, because it's very people-based. And if you're deciding for a hackathon, you have to be aware that this is very capacity and time challenging. Why a hackathon? A hackathon is like, if you are deeply integrated into an ecosystem, as we are, we have the connections to provide the right people to such kind of formats. So that's said first of all. Why a hackathon? A hackathon, in my opinion, is the format I do like the most, because of two factors. It is a pre-designed educational journey, and it helps us to get startups into our pipeline. So while we're educating a big bunch of young students, we can force them indirectly to think about if they want to create a startup out of a challenge, out of the idea. And if they want, we are there and we directly catch them and bring them into our pipeline, doing what we can do best, early stage startup incubation in our domain.
Thank you, Lucas. And I think that ties in very nicely to my next question, kind of broadening out beyond specific hackathons, of especially given, TUM Venture Labs' very obvious connection with the Technical University of Munich, and ARIN, all of the work that GFI-APAC does, providing more traditional lecture-based courses and university-based courses. I would love for you to just kind of put a finer point on the gap that you see yourselves filling as compared to those more traditional education pathways.
So there's a personal opinion and there is a professional opinion. The personal opinion is that I would have wished that organizations would have provided myself in my educational journey with very different innovative formats, like summer schools, like innovation programs, and so on, to just dive into learning experiences which really shape your kind of thinking, which is of course also connected to entrepreneurship. Talking about the Technical University of Munich, I mean, of course, there might always be gaps in education. I think it's not about gaps, because if you talk about gaps, you are about to talk about silos. And this is something we're going to challenge all the time, because we are an open ecosystem and we are a very open platform. That means throughout those educational formats we are executing, throughout the very different events we are executing, throughout the network we are weaving together, we are offering the whole ecosystem to participate in our formats, to actually close the gaps for their learning journeys, and to actually close silos between other entities. And if you have a look onto our or into our hackathon format we executed, there were so many different entities from TUM, from corporates, from students, those who would probably never interact together on their normal days. So I think it's not about filling in the gaps, it's about the offerings and bringing very different people and entities forward with this kind of platform. And if you're about to kill the silos forever, you're creating a thriving ecosystem which can then execute better educational formats in the end. And I think that's also kind of the mission we have.
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit too. I think likewise at GFI-APAC, like our goal is to create systems which will kind of positive feedback and create more. So I think we also were hoping to use this as something which will inspire, if not hackathons, like other ways of encouraging students to be really innovative. But just from like a needs for the students in not just, I know we targeted Singapore this time, but actually a lot of countries within the APAC region is we're really missing that kind of breakthrough thinking, or that very like push the boundary innovative thinking. And this is not just for people who like wanting to increase an amount of startups within the space, but the types of researchers which are going into the startups as well, right? So there is requests from the different people in the industry for students who are more able to think and are encouraged to think in this way. And the traditional education pathways maybe are not giving students enough space for that yet, right? Maybe it's a little bit more exam-based, it's a little bit not as focused on project work or kind of that creative problem solving. So any sort of education program that we want to do around all proteins needs to really concentrate on that creative problem solving. They need to learn the material, but even more importantly, they need to be able to do that creative problem solving. And they need to be able to do it themselves too, right? So we can't have somebody like step by step tell them everything. So even with the framework we designed for the students in the hackathon, they were given a good amount of time to really go out and workshop and ideate themselves, right? And even within that framework, you could see like the different types of creative approaches they took to brainstorming, to putting all of the ideas together. So in this case, we put the creative problem solving into the hackathon format, but even in our regular coursework we do at universities, we want to make sure that element is going into any sort of all protein education, because that's what we need in all proteins. It's still such a nascent industry.
One more thing to add. So those kind of, like Nathan, what you meant with traditional educational formats, we can also call it like frontal teaching. And if we do offer other formats to the ecosystem and provide them the experience, and if we can integrate those formats into a curriculum of modern study courses, then we can really reach a change and transformation of, I don't want to call it the education system because that's kind of a much bigger challenge, but offering entities also like Technical University of Munich, to which we are very, very strongly connected, other formats to institutes, professors, courses. There we can start in bringing a little bit of diversity and interesting formats into the curriculum. And I think that's a very, very big chance. And also, as we know from TUM Venture Labs, a very, very big challenge. But we can prove throughout very different venture labs that it's possible to integrate such courses into the overall curriculum and study courses, and also that the people are having much more fun while learning. And this is actually what we want to reach, right?
Yeah, I love that explanation. And I think that it at least opens the door for me to put a plug into the first iteration of this webinar series, which kind of looked at a blended approach of this much more traditional or frontal instruction with entrepreneurial-minded. A team from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill talked about their university-based course that was very entrepreneurial minded and brought in leading business experts and kind of culminated in a pitch, a Shark Tank-like presentation. So there are additional ways to stay creative within the university ecosystem as well, if that's where you are working within. But to follow up on kind of what both of you brought up of just how necessary it was to really get students involved with the specifics of the challenges that they had. And during your presentation, you had talked about how these industry partners were really involved far beyond just giving the challenge in terms of providing those inspirational talks and additional insight as needed. What I kept on hearing from you was that the selection of these industry partners really can make or break the success of a hackathon. So I would love to get some of your insight on, how you approached them and how you kind of scaffolded their participation to facilitate the success of the student participants.
I think it's probably a little bit different from GFI and Venture Lab side because the entities are designed differently. For us, it's very easy to get challenges from industry partners because those partners committed to be part of the Venture Labs to actually do open innovation, right? So the more innovation programs we run, the better for our partners. And we are very connected to the teams besides those organizations like BayWa and Dr. Oetker. And we do work very closely with people from different departments. And in the end, we're planning the year. We tell them how many innovation programs we have, and we are in conversation around those topics the whole year. So that means if we are not fast enough sometimes to integrate them, they tell us, when can we place our challenge? So they are very, very motivated to participate because they do also have their own objectives within their open innovation approach connected to our Venture Lab Fab. So very easy to connect, very easy to collect the challenges. But of course, communication always is key because you have to tell them that you need the challenge. You have to integrate them into the program. You have to teach them, or you have to explain them how their part does look like. You have to really underline that participation, online or offline depends, is really, really key. And you have to, in the end, they have to understand if they want their challenge to be challenged in a good way, if they want their challenge to be a very, very cool business concept afterwards, they have to participate a lot and bring a lot of effort in, while also saving their very, very valuable time. But it's also about the agenda and how you design the process. So, but from our case, there's a very motivated bunch of involved people. So we're always glad to work with them. And next week is another hackathon starting, and they're totally involved on site. So it's always great to work with them and very easy to get them as well.
From our side, I will bring 2 points, which are quite connected with what Lucas said either way. But in terms of making it really easy and clear for the partners, I think that's really important. They're like, as much as committed as they are, they're also very busy people. So even during the outreach, we prepared like a one-page hackathon, one pager, which outlined in detail like how much commitment is needed from their side. Like, basically provide the challenge, mentor from this day to this day, be present for this presentation, so they can see very clearly what they need to do. And then secondly, on GFI side, in terms of selecting the partners, I think likewise, we basically did that outreach to partners who were also already committed to building a workforce or committed to like teaching students. So this is kind of the outreach we did. And in terms of who we picked, it was a little bit based off of the challenges which they provided, which we felt was best suited for the students. right? These are like, I think we had people who provided great challenges, but the ones we picked were like, this, I think, makes the most sense for the students to work on. So a little bit of that pairing both ways of like the committed people and also they're bringing the right questions to the table.
And I know that we have a lot of representatives from industry on this call who might be coming from it or coming to it basically from the opposite side. And I did just kind of want to reiterate based on especially what Lucas, you were saying, and then Arin with this one pager of here's what we're asking. For those in industry who are looking to establish these connections with universities, with students and early career professionals, that's something that if you provide universities, the people that you are communicating with, I have seen this firsthand. If you provide them with a list of here's what we are willing to do, we would love to build this, that will inspire a lot of action. I did see a question come through of just like, we've tried open calls and it doesn't get much traction. I have experienced that myself. And typically it does require really targeted outreach. And so just identifying priority institution partners that you think are best. Maybe it's just because of geography and the ones closest to your primary plant. Maybe it is they have a pilot plant or an entrepreneurship program that you see as extremely relevant. But providing those concrete offers really can get the ball rolling with that. I will say that I did see someone's hand raised just for the sake of making sure we can kind of work this discussion through the end point. I'll recommend everyone just putting their questions in the Q&A box, and we will do our best to answer all of those. And anything that we do not address, I will say this right now, you can email me directly, and I will do my best to answer them, probably calling in Arin and Lucas as well. I will drop my email down in the chat as well. But I would say before I get far too excited and talking about kind of the end results and all of that, I did just want to check in on any unique considerations when we're thinking about those logistics, for the sake of our audience especially, that you really had to make because it's a virtual hackathon. I know you talked about this a little bit, but as opposed to people are in place and everything that you had to do to keep the motivation up, and Lucas, as you were saying, bombarding them with consistent tasks so that the momentum never flagged. If you could just maybe talk about primary lessons learned about that student engagement and any factors that you were able to identify that really separated the most successful groups from those who might have been a little less engaged.
First of all, to push them to the limits, you have to design a process which is strongly connected to deadlines. Do this until Monday, finish XYZ until Wednesday. So they don't have the chance to fall asleep within the process because they know that there are very important steps still following connected to deadlines. Talking about the overall logistics, I mean, it's a bit complicated because you cannot oversee everything also within the team. So most importantly is communicating throughout the overall hackathon all the time. And I think what we figured out, and Aaron would probably agree on that, is that we sometimes also missed to check the groups and people's feeling, how they behave in the group, how the overall team is performing. So you have to be really aware of the fact that it's human beings, which they've probably never had any thing to do with the other. Now they are put in a box of innovation where they really have to work on something. And it can happen that you have to change the teams. It can happen that you have to throw somebody out because the person is not performing. It can happen that you don't get all the information you need, and afterwards you realize, okay, we should have communicated much stronger. We should have communicated more topics more clear. But I think it's not about the process and the overall logistics. It's more about the overall group behavior. But I think Aaron can also add some facts about that too.
Yeah, I would say the biggest struggle we had was being able to check in on, like Lucas said, on every single Slack group, right? Like the ones which had the best pitch presentations, very easily you can see that they were the ones which were most active on Slack and most active on how often they were meeting, and things like that. I think what the students struggled with is maybe communicating when they had a problem with some of the members, and maybe that is the type of information which came up a little bit too late for some of the groups, right? If we were to be able to get that insight earlier, or if they were able to communicate the problems they have within the group earlier, then these issues could have been resolved. So perhaps even like next time, or like for future hackathons, thinking about like how managing like group work dynamics as one of the workshops we have, or like even implementing like team check-ins, which they need to do at the end of their meetings or on Slack. I feel like elements like this can help address this very difficult part of doing a virtual hackathon, right? Like it's just innately a challenge which comes from the fact that it's virtual. And I think we definitely did the best we could given the information we had and the knowledge we had. But I would say this is one element we could think about how, like, okay, how can we set up a system so that the students themselves can self-correct a little bit better, right? Without having us need to be super hands-on, because it's also really important that we're not too hands-on. Yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of want to reemphasize what you had said previously too. Like you had a very tough screen on what would be required of groups to see who would actually progress to the full hackathon. And for those of you who are thinking about, building something similar, if it's going to take so much of your resources, you might want to actually have a pretty tough filter, so that your resources are only going to those who will make the best use of it. And I will say, as academic community manager for a global and thereby virtual community, I know those struggles. I know we have a lot of people who are in education, training, or you are managers. And I just kind of want to, remind everybody that the best practices and the surprises that happen along the way in one circumstance will probably be pretty common and consistent across all. I know, like, I always get surprised by how hard it is to keep people engaged and check in with them, even though I've experienced it in so many different venues, and it just keeps on coming up. And so exactly as you both were saying, keeping that at the forefront and building those procedures before it gets started can be of huge help. And with that, I would love to transition kind of to the result. And I had seen a question.
Can I add one more thing, Nathan?
Oh,
I'm
please,
so sorry,
go ahead.
but I have, out of these happenings, in our venture lab, we developed a mechanism which is super, super simple, but it's also kind of the solution already for the topic we were talking about. We are establishing at the moment principles, like principal functions. That means like everybody from the core team, as we have more than 100 startups only in our venture labs, by the way, that's something I didn't mention beforehand. We are installing principles. That means every core team member has a special amount of startups on which the person has really take care of. If there's a task, you have to look up who's the principal for this startup. And concerning this hackathon, the learning can be that also in our team from GFI and Venture Lab, there are principal functions for everybody. That means in this case, one person would have 3 to 5 teams being the principal, checking in on the teams, and doing the overall team moderations there. And I think this could be a really important fact to establish the next time to get more into the internal team dynamics.
That's an excellent point. And selfishly, here's where I would also plug our alt protein project, the community that I referenced earlier. Part of what we do, those are student-led university groups around the world, is assign them a mentor, largely through the GFI ecosystem and my colleagues across the world. Arin is one of such mentors, and he does a fantastic job guiding the groups across the APAC region. And it really does make such a difference when there is a point person, even if the information they are providing is the same as, someone with a global community view like myself could, but I would be relatively faceless. And they're able to meet with a RIN on a much more consistent basis. And that really helps that motivation and that momentum keep up. And so with that, in terms of motivation, I would love to now kind of explore, the results of this hackathon and what the goals are, especially from the perspective of TUM Venture Labs, having gone through this process with so many startups. Just like any sort of post-event communication or guidance, and then how you might be able to measure the effects that you had on these students, both specifically with their pitches and just their general progress, because I know that can be quite a challenge.
I mean, clearly we do communicate the happening of the overall hackathon in our overall ecosystem. Of course, we called the hackathon a success story because it was a success story, even if the development was really, really a lot of work. Very different channels we use on that kind of communication side. Measuring and KPIs is a number with which we are struggling a bit at the moment, because there were winning teams, and of course those teams won, let's say, some prizes, and the prizes are about, hey, if you want to start this startup connected to the challenge or the learning, you do get special mentoring after the overall hackathon. And our KPI really would be the number of startups hopefully flooding into our pipeline to start the overall entrepreneurship journey, to work on their idea and their challenges further. So this is the most important KPI. It's like if you do another hackathon with companies and they are able to integrate an innovation in their company, you can measure the implementation level of the overall innovation by seeing how much money this innovation does make, right? So, but in our case, the goal we have is integrating the startups into our pipeline, and that's always our first aim, because our overall mindset is startup first, but to support a startup, you have to squeeze it into the pipeline.
Orin, was there anything you had wanted to add from GFI-APAC's perspective of that follow-up?
Yeah, so I think GFI-APAC's as well as GFI-Europe kind of like takeaway, or like I guess KPI for this is being able to like introduce a new platform to get people or students excited in an alternative protein career, right? In terms of like tracking, I don't think we have done that in, like, I would say phase 1 of this like hackathon development. But I do think this was a success story in getting like people genuinely excited and like aware of what a career pathway looks like, what sort of skills they need to use, what it would be like to work within a startup within this space. I would say even between TUM and us, like I think the big win for us was to be able to design like a successful platform for students to use, right? And to know what works, what doesn't work, right? And now I think we have kind of like the building blocks to start thinking about the end pathways a little bit more, right? So like, how do we get these students connected with like other pitch events or other like incubator events, or how do we get these students connected to like different career fairs or informed about different college courses? I feel like a lot of the work which inevitably had to go into this, given the time frame we had, was to get this first part done, right? Designing a really successful hackathon with good results. And now we have that first block done. I think we're ready to kind of add that second element in of like the pathways the students take afterwards. And I think when that element is added in, we will be able to get that kind of like second phase of KPIs, which is like who pursued this career, or which startup was formed, or did they go to this event, right? But in terms of like inspiring a generation of students to like pursue all proteins, I think that part has been encompassed with the way the program we designed, right?
And adding to that, what Aaron said is like you try to live and execute the platform approach, right? That means you have to enable as many touch points as possible to potential talents or overall people being interested into the game and the topic. And with the amount of touch points, if you would follow the customer journey of a young talent, for example, this would be also a very interesting KPI, because if they're showing up on other events, if they're participating on other topic related formats, you actually can prove that there is a really high potential that those talents are going into the industry, having impact, shaping future food, and getting into a transformational journey of the food industry. So I think that's also something to keep in mind, those touch points within the platform. And with the hackathon, it's even also a pipeline for you, right? It even starts with the hackathon. Now it's about you to provide touch points within this kind of platform and ecosystem to bring them to, or to help them learning where they belong within this industry.
Yeah, thank you for that perspective. And I will say, just from the general GFI perspective as well, one thing that we really hope is that, you know, one of the results of this hackathon is just more hackathons put on by other people, hopefully by some of the people who are watching this right now, because there are only so many students that we can reach, even if we are collaborating with a fantastic partner like TUM Venture Labs. So that is absolutely something, you know, take everything that we have learned, especially with, you know, like the really key aspects that they've been talking about of just how important that agenda is. You know, we'll be posting this on YouTube. You are welcome to just like copy and paste it to see all of the different activities and steps along the way, because that really does go such a long way to it. So to start wrapping up, Aaron, you even kind of mentioned just now you know what works and doesn't work. So I would love to kind of start concluding our time together by having you both just sharing a couple of primary lessons learned, and maybe one or two things that you would definitely repeat if you would, you know, bring another iteration of this hackathon in a couple of years, or things that you would make sure that you adjust or change.
I think I can start here. I would say one big thing was how important it was for me, Lucas, Dave, and Manasa to just work really, really well together, right? We had February, March, April, May, essentially, to put all of this together for implementation in June. We were meeting like weekly, and everybody took like responsibility for their role, initiative, like in designing. I think it took quite a decent amount of effort from all four of us, with really great communication, like organized planning, which I think Lucas really led on like the format of how we do all of that. So I think this core development team, like being really inspired and like not, you know, not like trying to finesse all of these things, just being like, okay, I trust you to do your role, and when you need like support, we'll like kind of work together. So there was a lot of trust and solid communication. This element was really, really important in getting it together in a really short amount of time. I would say lessons learned is like, big thing is there are a couple nuances in how we executed the whole program where, you know, I think we can clean up the edges here and there, but overall we have a really clean modular format where now we can implement this whole program with much less developmental effort, right? Now it's more like cleaning up some things and getting to the right partners involved. What I would really want to work on in a second iteration of this is adding that part B, right? How do we get the final pitches to other places? How do we get them to like coursework? How do we track where they go? I think this is where I would want to put like that 4-month sprint into designing and then adding on to this part A, which we've already created really well. I'll pass to Lucas.
I totally agree on every point. So most importantly is the team which is developing the overall format. So GFI has the overall expertise on alternative proteins, and I brought in the innovation program expertise, right? And this interdisciplinary team with high trust, very good communication, clear project management really made the execution really, really easy, let's say. I mean, we all know that projects can be very annoying and when they get tough and when they do take too long. To be very honest, it wasn't annoying at all because exactly of that team. Lessons learned. I think we didn't really do huge mistakes because TUM Venture Labs already also brought the expertise in. We talked about the team check-ins and the principles. I can also imagine because there's always a drop-off rate and a no-show rate. So we really communicated very strictly that you ship in or you ship out, as easy as that. But I could imagine that we do during the application process, 2 very small sessions, check-ins before we even choose or have chosen participants to inform them on how this is going to look like. And then you can also start interacting with the potential participants. Because if you do the evaluation overall, you cannot read everything. It's all between the lines, right? So if some names already came up during those presentations and talks beforehand, you might do not a very different evaluation, but you might think about some people, integrate them and giving them the chance, because normally out of just reading texts, you might oversee potential of talents. And this is a very important point. Always try not to oversee the potential of talents because you interact with them. It's not just about they did the right application. It's about where they actually want to belong afterwards, right? And that does make a very, very big difference. It sounds a bit crazy, but I think there were not the big fails we did. Of course, we can clean some edges, as Aaron said, but I am very, very thankful that everything went very well because I know that hackathons can really crash and you cannot even control it.
And we had a lot of fun. I feel like it was a really cool process to like work together and execute. I think the students were really proud of the work. And then I think just the 4 of us were also really proud of the outcome. So I think it was like also just a really fulfilling experience to work on it too. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Lucas.
No, like just we really got appreciated throughout the process and also after the hackathon. That's also very important for us as normal people, right? Because you need to get insights on your overall team and personal performance. And I think they were quite happy with the overall performance. And that's also really connected to the overall communication we did, because we really communicated everything a lot of times very, very clear. So even if the people were in Europe and Singapore, so somewhere around the world, they always knew what to do. They always knew the next steps, and they also always felt integrated into the process.
And I do just want to point out, to underline this, exactly. I completely agree. I was only able to see this from the outside, but it seemed like a smashing success. And the team that you built was basically the exact same thing that you were asking of your students. You had the technical expertise, the alternative protein expertise with GFI-APAC, and you had the business expertise with TUM Venture Labs. And something else that I just kind of want to remind everybody, including myself, which really made me happy as someone who has spent time teaching in the classroom, is in terms of lessons learned, you were talking about your own team. and the importance of what you provided the students as opposed to how the students engaged with you. Because really that scaffolding is incredibly important, especially when you're asking students to build a skill that is really novel to them. So as we close up, I do want to say to everyone watching live and afterwards on YouTube, if you have any desire to build some of these partnerships with universities, if you're coming from industry, with industry if you're coming from academia, and with students who are, you know, the font of all of these future alternative protein professionals. That is a large part of what I do and the rest of my team does on the GFI US SciTech team. So you are always welcome to reach out to me. Our student leaders in the Alt Protein Project are frankly some of the most inspirational people I have ever had the pleasure of working with. And they are designing and participating in a lot of their own hackathons as well. So to start wrapping things up, there are a couple of resources that I would particularly point everyone to, given this seems like something that is up your alley. I dropped it in the chat, but all of these are available on our website, gfi.org, some of which, to point out, is our teaching library, which includes syllabi, slide decks, other sorts of educational resources that you can really just pull from to start building whatever program you are interested in. We have our online course on the protein transition. We have an educator community, which kind of inspired this webinar series in the first place. And finally, in that list is our collaborative alternative protein researcher directory, which is a list of people who are actively engaged in research, looking for collaborations, or looking to enter it all across academia, and can be a great way to find collaborators with that. The final thing that I will ask, again, stemming from my time teaching in the classroom, I just dropped a very brief feedback survey for everyone who is attending live, just to kind of learn about what other sorts of topics you might want to see in this webinar series, anything that we could have done more effectively to give you the tools you need to build these programs and expand the alternative protein workforce. So please take a few minutes to do that if you are able. And with that, I just want to give a huge thank you to Arin and Lucas for providing this hackathon to our community, for sharing this information. Of course, to Renee, who is behind the scenes helping make this all happen. And to all of you, because the fact that you're here means that you share our mission in helping to make a world where alternative proteins are no longer alternative. We couldn't do it without you. I thank all of you, and I hope to hear from you soon.